All right, we are live for day number 2, and as you can see, I am currently in the pajamas because this is the conference you can attend in your pajamas, and I got grief from people last night in the chat room saying that, hey Richard, where's your thing? So I've got the dressing gown on, I'm all set to go. Hopefully you're all relaxed as well, and we're going to get into tonight's session. So the first one we've got is Aaron Powell doing some stuff around, I don't know, JavaScripty stuff. So JavaScript, all the things. Aaron, you can jump in and start talking now. I'm going to go mute myself and you can entertain the troops.
Oh, I should, let me just mute my phone while I'm at it, so I don't keep getting
don't do
text
that.
messages.
We're far too professional for that.
Yay! All right. Cool, there we go. I can see myself on the other screen. Time for a screen share, full screen. Alrighty. That's all up, I'm assuming. We've got like a 1 minute delay with the other screen that I'm watching, so I can see the chat window. So feel free to ask me any questions. And yes, I'm going to be talking about the wonderful world of front-end tools for web developers. As Richard said, I'm Aaron. I'm a Redify consultant, and you'll find me on the internet at Slice. Really disconcerting seeing myself with like a 1 minute lag on in my peripheral vision. Anyway, moving on. So I'm going to be talking about a bunch of different tooling that has started to become popular in the last several years, really, outside of the Microsoft space, primarily focused for people doing front-end web development. I do mostly front-end myself, so a lot of these tools are the kinds of tools that I'm working with day to day. But they're tools that are have not really been that popular in the ASP.NET stack, just mostly because we've had other tools to do that, but they're starting to gain a bit of traction. And I think it's really important that we, if we're ASP.NET developers, need to start being aware of them. If you're web developers on any other stack, these tools are also going to be applicable to you guys as well, and it's worthwhile being across them if you're not already familiar with them. So I'm kind of breaking this talk down into the sort of different scenarios that we want to that we'll be going through when we're building our front-end heavy web applications. So the first thing I want to do is start with the where. So where do we get the stuff that we use to build the sites that we're going to be building, particularly the front-end stuff? Because the more complex a website that we're building, the more external dependencies we're going to need. It's gone are the days where you include jQuery and then you write everything yourself from then onwards. We now have plenty of other different tools that we're going to be needing. And for a long time, NuGet was the answer if you're an ASP.NET developer. You want to install jQuery, you want to install Bootstrap or anything like that. It was always to go to NuGet. What's come out in the last kind of 6 months or so as the ASP.NET Next stuff has become more and more prevalent, it's become obvious that NuGet is not going to be the answer going forward. The primary reason for that is NuGet is really Microsoft-centric. A lot of the big popular JavaScript frameworks and CSS frameworks initially weren't on NuGet because, well, they're being built by people that are not working in the Microsoft ecosystem. So that wasn't their target delivery system. They didn't really know what NuGet was. They probably didn't have it. They're probably running on Macs and they're really unlikely to have NuGet. So they had their own set of tooling. So NuGet was kind of this other one that they then had to manage, or people had to manage on their behalf. So instead, we've seen much more the rise of things like NPM, which is a package manager for Node. And really, if you're doing any front-end web applications these days and not having Node on your machine, I think you're really missing out a lot of power of what you can be doing for front-end application dev. The other popular tool for where do we get our external dependencies is Bower. And we'll have a look at these two right now. So NPM is, it was the original package manager for Node. It doesn't stand for Node Package Manager, as a lot of people initially thought, and a lot of people probably still think. I don't think it actually stands for anything, other than they make up acronyms that use those 3 letters. But basically, it's a dependency management system that is just designed for bringing in dependencies from a centralized repository and exposing them to an application. These can be client-side applications or these can be server-side applications. NPM, being in the Node ecosystem, works off a module system called CommonJS. CommonJS you've possibly come across if you've done Node, or if you've done Node development, you've come across it. If you haven't done Node development, you might have seen it in talks or blogs and things like that. And it's var foo equals require and then what you're requiring in. So that's a common JS style of doing dependency injection or dependency management for front-end applications. So it looks like something like this if we were going to be using jQuery. We can use jQuery via NPM. We can use pretty much any dependency. It's just a delivery system, really, at the end of the day. So we would do npm install jQuery, and then we would var $= equals require jQuery, and then do our jQuery magic as we've got here. Not really that different, not really that special, but it's basically the sort of thing that we could do. And in this case, we're using a CommonJS module loading system, and we've loaded the latest version of jQuery. It's gone into a file called package.json, which lives at the root of our application, similar to package.config. And it specifies what dependencies, versions we've got, and things like that. We'll have a look at these files that I'll talk about throughout this a little bit later. So the other popular one is Bower. Bower, not sure where it came out of, but their idea was that npm is was at least initially very much seen as a solution to getting external dependencies into Node applications, but this is seen as the solution to getting them into front-end applications, be those running in Node or in any other ecosystem. So first thing you've got to do is you've got to install Bower. So you use npm to install Bower. So we're using a package manager to install a package manager. Commonly, you'll install Bower globally. You don't actually need Bower inside of your project itself. So you would globally install Bower and then start running commands against that. So you would Bower install jQuery, and like we did with npm, with Bower install jQuery, and it goes out. One of the primary differences with Bower versus npm, npm you upload a module to the npm website, like you upload a NuGet package to NuGet. With Bower, it actually just looks straight at GitHub repositories, and it uses the tagging inside of GitHub to work out what versions. So this is really good if the person who's managing your open source project that you want to depend on is make sure that tagging their libraries appropriately. If they're not, you're going to have a whole lot of pain, which I found out when people started wanting to use one of mine by Bower, and I had no idea what Bower, how to get something into Bower. It took me ages to work out that you just need to tag your releases with inside of your Git repository on GitHub. There's other ways that you can install that, but GitHub is the primary delivery mechanism. The other difference is that when you install something from npm, it ends up in a node_modules folder, but instead these go into a Bower_modules folder. And the way that you then add those into your website is you would have a relative or absolute path to the Bower modules, and then the particular file you want to pull out of that, or load it in through some other tooling that we'll have a look anyway. But I've seen a lot of websites that just directly point to their Bower modules, and that is a great leaky abstraction because you've just told everyone that you've got Bower modules as a folder on your server, and they can go in and they can poke around at a whole bunch of files you probably didn't you accidentally serving instead of deliberately serving out. But there's also plenty of other different tools out there that do the exact same thing of package management. These two are the primary ones that people are using. There's one that's getting a bit of traction at the moment called JSPM, which is a JavaScript package manager, because the other two are not JavaScript package managers, despite the fact that they're written in JavaScript. We needed another package manager as well. The primary difference, though, with JSPM is it's trying to work with the ES6 modules, syntax and stuff like that. I've not really done a lot of research into that, other than it looks like just the cool new kid on the block that wants to be popular, but I'm unconvinced that it is really as popular and things that you want to go with. As some comments have said, yes, things like TypeScript, they do generate CommonJS modules. TypeScript can also generate ANDs, which are asynchronous module definitions, which are then loaded by require.js and other module loading systems. So we've had a look at where we get things. Now, what are we going to be getting? Because we need files. We need to make files. Particularly as there's the rise of the ultra lightweight editor. VS Code is you probably see on my toolbar up there, and I've got some demo that we'll do in that later. We need to be able to make files, and while we can right click and create a new text file and then give it a definition. Something that has been really awesome from a Visual Studio tooling perspective is that you could do scaffolding. So I have some kind of a template that I want to go with. So I go file new MVC controller. And then the MVC controller also creates an MVC view, it puts it in the appropriate folder and a whole bunch of fun stuff like that, because the base structure of what this file should look like, class with the correct subclass and namespaces and some default using statements and all those sorts of things. But what about when we're building, client-side applications, or when we're working with these lightweight text editors? This is where another tool called Yeoman has started to become popular. Yeoman is exactly that. It is a generator. It generates files, basically. That's what it does. So we use npm to install Yeoman. Again, we're starting with npm, and this is why I say that if you're not using Node and doing front-end applications, you're probably missing out on a lot of really good things. So we install Yeoman, and then we can install something like the ASP.NET generator. And then once we've installed the ASP.NET generator, we yo ASP.NET. And then when we do that, we get something like this. Not that console, this console. Let me have a look. What am I up to? Temp 10. Temp 10. I just need to turn on Node. IOJS is I run. 1. And if we go yo ASP.NET, we get something like this. So this is a Yeoman generator that has been created by the OmniSharp team, which has contributors from Microsoft. And it gives us the ability to start creating, this is a base application. I don't have anything in this folder at the moment. You saw me make directory, and I can start creating something like a new ASP.NET web application. It then prompts me for some things like I want a web application called web application. And there we go, it's created me. Think of web application, which I go web application, and I have controllers, I have a base view, I have the root file, I have project.json, package.json, startup, all the sorts of things that you would get from the file new experience with inside of Visual Studio. But this is the sort of thing that we don't need a full editor like Visual Studio. But then again, every day we're not going to go yo ASP.NET because I want to create an entirely new ASP.NET application. We're more likely going to be doing something with an existing ASP.NET application. So I can go to my controllers folder, my compilers folder, and then yo ASP.NET MVC controller, and I will call this hello world controller. Bam. And we wait a few seconds, and that has now created me a new controller called Hello World Controller, which is it's the basic same experience that we would get from doing like file new, but we can do this. It scaffolds up the base stuff that we would need. There is a ton of different generators out there for Yeoman. It's really grown in popularity over the last 6 to 12 months, and there's things everywhere from like the slide deck that I'm using. It's called Bespoke. You can yo Bespoke, and then that sets you up a basic HTML slide deck that installs a bunch of other tooling that you're going to need to be able to compile down from Jade and Stylus, which it uses under the hood. And then it's also got scaffolding to build up, plugins for Bespoke and things like that. The ASP.NET Yeoman generator can generate pretty much everything you would need from an ASP.NET application. So I can generate views, controllers, web API controllers, new projects, all sorts of things like that you can do from Yeoman. It's a really scarily powerful tool, but it's come from that thing that I'm very used to from Visual Studio, just like file new and bam template, to something that works very well with lightweight editors or lightweight tooling sets. So yeah, I can be doing something with ASP.NET vNext on from Visual Studio Code, and from the command line I can spin that up. Or I could write my own template if I had, say, a particular JavaScript design pattern that we were following inside of my project, just like yo and run my own generator and create new files, things like that. Okay, so we've looked at where do we get our dependencies. We looked at what we're going to be creating, but how are we actually going to be getting those dependencies into the application that we're creating and being able to serve something out. So I've talked a bit about a couple of different module systems. CommonJS being the one that's grown out of like the Node system. We've got AMD, which is the asynchronous module definitions, which grew out of require.js and the fact that when we're running in the browser, everything happens asynchronously. So we sort of like need these things to happen asynchronously, that you don't, downloading scripts is non-blocking. There's another one called UMD, or Universal Module Definition, which is an approach to making something that could be used by both CommonJS and AMD. So you basically wrap your JavaScript library in some additional code that exposes it depending on what system you're going with. And you can always just randomly throw scripts into the bottom of the page and just reference like 100 scripts and deal with the really awesome download times that your site's going to have as soon as you do that. But really, a modular system is the best way to go about something like this, because we've got dependencies everywhere and we really want to do it. But which module system should you choose? Like, there's so many out there. So how do you know which one to go with? Personally, I find AMDs are a little bit archaic because they are more designed about, as I said, downloading things asynchronously, and you end up with callbacks. And in JavaScript, we can explode callback trees pretty crazily. You can not have the continuous downloads, so kind of remove the asynchronicity of an AMD using require.js tools and like some tools for similar AMD loaders, but you always have to start with a callback. And that, to me, as a JavaScript developer, it's just you're starting with a problem by having to like drive into a callback system to initially. Personally, I'm going to suggest that if you're doing any new JavaScript projects, if you're able to invest some time in existing JavaScript projects and doing dependency management, that you start looking into the ES6 module system. This is something that is going to happen in JavaScript. I mean, we're kind of talking like 5 years before that you're probably writing it in every single project, just because even the evergreen browsers at the moment don't support the ES6 module systems syntax. But it's going to be coming. It's part of the language, so it will be there and it will be optimized for. And we've got ways that we can work with that today. I can't remember what that point was, so I'm just going to skip. It's really good that I don't have feedback of people just like groaning at my bad jokes or being able to say, no, explain that point, because I can just go, nah, I'm moving on. Stuff is old. So when it comes to doing module-based applications in JavaScript, there's a couple of popular tools. Browserify wasn't the first, it was the second by about 5 days. I think someone did a tweet that they thought it was the first, but they got called out on that, and they went back and looked, and the initial commit was about 5 days behind another module loading system that's not as commonly used. But Browserify is one of the big popular ones. Basically, what Browserify does is it converts the CommonJS module system into something that can be run in the browser. So we install Browserify from NPM, as we've installed everything else so far. We would write something like, create a function called add. We export that from our file. So if you've done Node dev, this is probably very familiar to you. In a different file, we require add, and then we invoke that as though add was something in the page. Problem is that like this kind of requiring doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the browser, because we still have to like download that file. That's the initial approach. You've still got to download that file. You've still got to get that file into the page somehow. And that's what Browserify does, is it looks at all your require statements, works out your dependency ordering that you have, like what modules do you need at what point in time, reorders them by like reading them in from the file system, puts them in the appropriate order based off of when you're going to need them, and then dumps them out to one single file, plus a bit of boilerplate code so that the require actually works and export works and stuff like that. So you end up writing something that looks very much like a Node app, and then using that very much in a web space. The other popular one at the moment, and this one's getting a lot more popular, I've seen a lot more people, at least a lot of the people I follow on Twitter are talking about Webpack. as opposed to Browserify, and it's very much the same approach. So we install Webpack, we create a module, and the primary difference is that it can be done from an ANZ approach. So I just did an illustration of using it in an ANZ fashion. It can also be done with CommonJS, like we saw with the Browserify code just before. Ultimately, they do very much the same thing. Webpack is a bit more bare bones. Browserify is a bit more bare bones than Webpack. You end up installing a lot of additional plugins if you want to do some really complex things with Browserify. I'm using Browserify on the project at the moment and have not really found any problems that I would need to look for additional tooling. So I'm quite happy to stick with Webpack. With Browserify. Webpack hasn't enticed me enough away. So also because there's not a lot of things that are built into Webpack, into Browserify as opposed to Webpack, I find it a bit more flexible. I can add my own extensions a lot easier than having to do what's prescribed out of the box. Also, both of them have extensibility models. I've written a very small extension for Browserify as well. It's just something I'm playing around with at the moment, but it was about 10 lines of code to modify the file before it goes out because I want to do some additional transformations that I didn't have existing tools in my chain to do that for. So when are we actually going to be when do we use these tools? How do these fit into the process that we've got for building ASP.NET applications or any front-end web applications? We need to resolve dependencies. If we're using TypeScript or we're using ES6 and we want to convert that to ES5, we're using CoffeeScript. We might want to run them through a transpiler. We need to combine files because we don't want to have 100 simultaneous requests trying to happen to download all of our JavaScript files or CSS for that matter. And ultimately, we want to minify this sort of stuff. We want to get as much as we can by squeezing it so it doesn't go out over the wire. We also probably want to have different configurations for different environments. When I'm working on my local machine, I probably don't need it to go through a minifier because I want to be able to see what the original variables were called. I want to have that richer debugging experience than I would get from a minified file, or even with source maps that I get with a minified file. So I might want to do some different things per environment. And this is where we get into the MS Build-esque tools of the front-end developer world. So Grunt was possibly the first of these tools, at least the first that really got popular. And basically, Grunt is a generic task runner. So it's very much MS Build-esque. You give it commands, and it will run those commands, and we install it from NPM, as we do with everything else. The only thing that with Grunt that people are turned off by is that it's very config-driven. And that'll make a bit more sense in just a moment. Because the other tool that I want to talk about is Gulp. So Gulp kind of came out of the fact that there was a lot of people kind of getting fed up with Grunt and the fact that it was very config-based, is they wanted a way that looked and felt a lot more writing something programmatically. And that's where Gulp is. Gulp is a streaming task runner. So where Grunt, we execute something and then we have an output, and then that's ready for the next thing. We do a lot of disk I/O with Grunt. With Gulp, on the other hand, we work with Node.js streams. So something happens, it's put in memory, and then we pass that stream around, which can make it a bit more performant. And I've just done a conversion of our build process from Grunt to Gulp, and we've found a remarkable increase in performance in just the time it takes to build our front-end assets. Again, it's all from NPM, and yeah, I'll come to how they actually look in just a moment. So again, which one would I use? As I said, I was using Grunt on the project, not using it anymore, basically because I've decided that we should move to Gulp because I wanted to try and get some more performance out of it, and I found Gulp being much better in that space. The fact that it's streams just seem a lot more logical to work with. Even when I've delved into the depths of MS Build, it is a lot more of a streaming process than it is let's read a file, let's write it to disk. The next thing will happen completely independent of what the last step happened. It will read that file from disk, or at least where it should be on disk, and then so the disk I/O can be a bit more painful with Grunt. And I'm sure there's ways around it, but I've just never found a good example of how to do basically Gulp using Grunt. Before I get on to my last slide, because I can see that I'm closely running out of time, I'm going to jump over to just some code just to show you how this sort of thing would look inside of an actual project. So this is a project I spun up earlier today. Yes, I wrote my demos earlier today, of course. And the first thing I'm starting with, this file up here is the Grunt file. So, sorry, the Gulp file. I've used Gulp as the build manager for this. So first thing we do is we would run a Gulp command that executes a particular thing we want to execute. To do that, it will look for this Gulp file on disk. It expects that at the root of the folder that you're working with. So if I was inside my controllers folder, it's going to freak out. So it'll execute. I've imported a whole bunch of dependencies, things that I'm doing. You see I've got some source maps in there, using ESLint for doing analysis style and FS cop style stuff for my JavaScript. I'm using Browserify from within inside of Gulp to do my combinations and transformations. Using Babel because I'm writing this as ES6 code and I want to convert that down to being valid within inside of the browsers today. And finally, I've got Uglify in there because I want to do some minification in certain scenarios. So from kind of lines 13 to 24, I'm setting up Browserify. First thing, invoke the Browserify plugin. So this is another thing that's different between Grunt and Gulp. Gulp, we tend to use just native node modules node modules instead of Grunt specific node modules as you would use in when doing something with Grunt. So you have to solve the Grunt Browserify plugin, whereas in Gulp you just use Browserify. I've given Browserify some config, telling that I want to enable debugging. Here's the root of my application, my JavaScript application. Here's some file extensions that you're going to be dealing with. Transform that using Babelify, which is a Browserify transformer wrapped around Babel. And then that's going to be output through app.min.js and then to a particular folder on disk. Now, the important things that I've got here is I've defined some tasks. So I've got a Gulp task called clean, that's just going and deleting files that have previously been done. I have an ESLint task that will go through my JS and JSX files because this is a React project. I'll be talking about React at the end of the week. Stay tuned for that one. And that pipes through ESLint, we do some formatters, and then if there's an ESLint error, I'm actually going to fail my build process, so I don't continue on, even though I might have errors, but I can continue on if I don't do that ESLint fail and error. I have another task for running Browserify. And then down here, I have a specific task for the default task that I want to run. And that is then just a chain of a number of other tasks that it's going to execute. So the first thing it'll do is it'll execute the clean task and delete all the previous assets, then run ESLint, and assuming that's all fine, we'll run Browserify. If I just go back up to the ESLint task here, this is what I mean by it's using the Node.js stream. So we get a stream that is all these files on disk, and then we pipe that through to the next step and the next step and the next step, rather than copying them to a folder and then pointing ESLint at that folder, which is sort of more of the Grunt approach. I have a release task in there, so I can, and that runs clean and ESLint, and does Browserify slightly differently because I want to do source maps and minification and compression. I also have a watch command, so executing a couple of tasks when a file system changes. So it'll look for JavaScript and JSX files, and then run ESLint and Browserify if those files are modified. So if I come to my app.js, so the entry to my program, I'm importing a couple of files, and this is using the ES6 module syntax. So it imports the to-do view, and it's a to-do application, people, mind blown. We import that, we import React, we import variables from that. I really cannot wait until VS Code supports ES6 and stop getting squigglies everywhere, or at least support language pluggability so we can get some React supported here so I don't get squigglies on that too. So that sets up my React app. So jump into my to view. This imports a couple of other dependencies, and then does React goodness. What it does ultimately, don't worry about that. I'll be talking about that later in the week. But if I was to go task watch, just turn on my watcher here, on the output on the right hand side, that'll spin up in a moment. I think hopefully it was doing that before. Come on. It's going to be like a minute till you realize that my demos have failed. Nah, I don't think that the watch is going to run there. Let's turn off that. Instead, I can come down to here and go Gulp watch. So I can run this from the command line, or I have a task inside of Visual Studio Code that's running that, and there we go. So it's started up my file system watcher. Now let's just come in and like remove the final line, come back. You'll see that the file system watcher has picked that up. It's passed that through. You see it started. You see that it says started ESLint and started Browserify. It actually runs these in parallel. And if one fails, then the task fails ultimately. And you'll see that the ESLint reported an error saying that there was no new line at the end of the file, which was expected. So it's given me an error and stopped. Come back to code, add my line, go back. There we go, ESLint starts up again, runs, success, excellent, we're all good. And I can, say, hit that in the browser. Ooh. Here we go, a lovely to-do application, which we've all seen to-do applications written before. But this is ultimately something that is all come out of a bunch of different files that we've used, ES6 modules, pushed through Browserify, running by Gulp, and then ultimately got a single file at the end, which looks just like this. Yeah. Several thousand lines of God knows what. And source maps at the end. But if we quickly scroll down to to-do, just jump, touch. Oh, good. Now I'm in code comments for to-do. No, that's not what I wanted. To-do. To-do item. There you go. Okay, so this is here's an example of something that's been compiled down from React, and this is the component that we've actually got under the hood to be used by React, that is then being ordered in a way that it exports out of here, and then it's known how to load that in through the Browserify module syntax. All right. So if you wanted to use this today, that code demo that I just had, that was an ASP.NET VNext application. We saw Yeoman with the ASP.NET VNext applications. But what if you wanted to use it in an ASP.NET project today? Like right now, today, a project that you've got currently going in your team. The first thing you should do is stop using the system.optimization or system web optimization. That's a typo in my slide deck. That is what the ASP.NET team originally had for doing like bundling and minification, stuff like that. Stop using it. It's really designed around now outdated approach to doing front-end asset management. It's definitely the primary problem that it has is that it is incapable of dealing with source maps, which are like PDBs for front-end tooling. It just has no way of managing that. I find no good reason that I should be using system optimizations in my tool chain today in ASP.NET. The other thing it does is it does runtime bundling instead of compile time bundling, which means that you always have a bit of a hit taken because you have to do that up front. So you have to do that at least in one individual request at some point. You don't have that pre-compiled as a build artifact, essentially, which is what we can get from Gulp or Grunt or any of the other similar tools. If you're using Visual Studio 2013 still, there's an extension called the Task Runner Explorer. It's in the box in VS 2015, and this is a tool that is designed to run Grunt or Gulp. Pick your poison; it will run both from Visual Studio. You can hook it up to run with particular Visual Studio actions. So, like, I have mine set up so that the watch is bound to solution open. So as soon as I open the solution in Visual Studio, the Gulp's file system watcher is turned on. You can also have things that run like on build, on post build, on clean. So you can have like your clean task from Grunt being or Gulp being run as a clean within inside of Visual Studio. So definitely install that if you're not already using that and using Grunt or Gulp today. Do use NPM. I'm not a fan of Bower. I would much prefer to use NPM for all my modules, all external dependencies. The primary reason I would use NPM is you're going to have NPM on your machine regardless of whether you're using Bower or whether you're using NPM as a module system. If you're using Bower, you're still going to have NPM on your machine. It just seems like you've got this double handle, and to me that just seems a bit unnecessary. Do treat your client-side assets like you would anything else in a .NET build process. For too long, the client-side assets have just been this thing that we have on the side that we deal with when we deal with. We don't actually have to think about how they're created and compiled and all that sort of stuff. Just treat them like you would a DLL that you're outputting from the class library. Put them through a compile process. Treat them as an output. Don't make some user have to suffer through the first hit that does all your asset minification, bundling, etc. Do that beforehand. Do that as a build step. Don't be afraid to start using these tools today. It's very easy to start adding something like Gulp to a project, to even just do a simple pass over a bunch of images and run them through an image optimization, and then output them back in as the source images that you where the source images were. That's not something that's overly complex to do. It's not something that is going to require a lot of different changes. So adding that, it's not that hard. It's not that daunting. And like I said, these tools you're going to find popping up more and more. Visual Studio 2015 comes with Grunt and Gulp. Pretty sure it installs them as part of its installer. So these tools are probably going to be on your machine anyway. And if they're not on your machine and you're doing rich client-side applications, or even client-side applications that are not single-page applications, they have a bunch of JavaScript in them. I think not using these tools means you're missing out on a lot of a rich ecosystem out there. So,
hey Aaron, I'm jumping in. Guess what?
Because that was about 5 minutes over time.
7, but who's counting?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good because that was exactly the last point that I had. Yeah. Woo.
All right, let's do a couple of questions very quickly because then we'll get set for Mitch's session. Let's see, what's the highest voted questions we've got here? Do you prefer Grunt or Gulp? You answered that one.
I answered that one, Mitch, good. Yes. And yes, thoughts on JSPM. I think I added some thoughts on that. To be honest, it just seems like a new kid on the block. It might gain some traction, but again, with that last point that I just had on these slides here, you're going to have NPM on your machine anyway. I don't see the advantage of using these other tools if you're already starting with NPM. Like going out and getting a secondary module system, just to me, it seems like overkill.
All right, and workflow with Team City and Octopus, last one.
Yep. So with Team City, there's a plugin that I found for running Gulp or Grunt tasks. We use that in our project at the moment, and basically I have that running straight. I actually have that running before our compile step. People are making jokes in the side chat window, are they? I haven't got that.
No, that was my daughter who just decided to walk in front of the webcam.
Oh, right. I don't have your webcam open. No, so I didn't see that. Yeah, so it's really easy to add to a Team City process. I wouldn't be, for me, it's not something that Octopus should do. It's something that should always happen as Team City. It should be something that is treated as the output of a build. We run Gulp as a build step before we run our MS build step, which is our solution compile. The output of that is combined with the output of MS build. They're put into our nutcade, which is then pushed through Octopus deploy to deploy to our server.
Excellent. All right, so let's wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Aaron. And if you weren't here last night, we're doing the virtual applause, which means in the chat window you put in the word clap, or you give Aaron the clap or something like that. Or Golf clap.
Don't give me
Yeah.
the clap.
Perfect.
In like a minute,
Aaron
they're gonna
will
get
hang.
that joke.
Yeah. As long as we get a joke, not something else. Aaron's going to hang around in the chat window just briefly while we set up for the next session. It'll be about a 5-minute transition. And we will see you in the next session shortly. Thank you very much, Aaron, and we will talk to you guys in not long.